a rancher sewed a white dress for a great Apache woman, and all the warriors arrived at the wedding. In the wide, sunburned plains of the American Southwest, where the land stretched far and wide and the mountains rose like silent guards in the distance, there lived a rancher named Thomas. He was a man of simple habits, shaped by years of hard work under the open sky. His skin was weathered by the relentless sun, and his hands were rough and strong from handling cattle, mending fences, and tending to the chores that never ended. Thomas lived alone on his ranch, which was nestled near the edges of an Apache settlement. Despite the isolation, he had learned to live in harmony with the land, respecting its rhythms, its dangers, and its quiet beauty. Nearby, in the heart of the Apache community, lived a woman named Nayeli. She was a figure of quiet strength and dignity, admired by everyone in her tribe for her wisdom and courage. Unlike many, Nayeli had grown up learning both the old ways of her people and the subtle lessons of the new world encroaching upon their lands. She moved with grace and authority, whether leading younger women in daily tasks, tending to the children, or helping to resolve disputes. Her presence alone commanded respect, but her warmth and understanding made her beloved. Everyone, from the elders to the youngest members of the tribe, trusted her advice, valued her judgment, and sought her guidance when the weight of decisions pressed heavily on them. Thomas and Nayeli had known each other for many years, long enough for a bond to form that was rooted in mutual respect. At first, their interactions were cautious and polite. Thomas, a man from the ranching world, had little experience with the customs of the Apache, and Nayeli, proud of her heritage, had every reason to be careful around outsiders. Yet over time, through small gestures of kindness and shared moments of work and laughter, a connection grew between them. Thomas admired Nayeli's wisdom and resilience. He watched her manage difficult situations with patience, solving conflicts without anger and speaking with a calm authority that demanded attention. Nayeli, in turn, appreciated Thomas's steady nature, his honesty, and his willingness to learn rather than impose his ways. Their friendship gradually blossomed into a deep, unspoken affection. They spent long afternoons together, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories of their lives, finding comfort in the quiet companionship that few could understand. Thomas would often help Nayeli with practical tasks, fixing a broken fence or fetching supplies, while she would share knowledge of the land, teaching him about edible plants, tracking animals, and the subtle signs of weather changes that could make or break a rancher's day. Their worlds were different, yet they found harmony in the overlap, a balance between tradition and practicality. As their relationship grew, the question of the future inevitably surfaced. Thomas began to think seriously about marriage, not as an obligation, but as a genuine desire to honor the woman he admired. He wanted to do more than simply ask for her hand. He wanted to show his respect in a way that acknowledged her culture and the life she had always known. He understood that, for Nayeli, marriage was not just a personal decision. It was a step that connected families, communities, and traditions. The thought of how to approach this with the care it deserved weighed on him heavily, for he knew that missteps could cause misunderstandings or offense. Meanwhile, the Apache community was aware of Thomas's intentions. Whispers of curiosity and caution circulated. Some elders were skeptical. After all, outsiders often failed to understand the depth of Apache traditions. Others were more observant, seeing the genuine respect Thomas had shown over the years. Nayeli herself knew the path forward would require patience, honesty, and clear intentions. She wanted a partner who could honor her world as much as she honored his. Thomas's quiet diligence and humility had not gone unnoticed, and she slowly realized that he might be the kind of man capable of bridging both their lives with sincerity. One late afternoon, Thomas made a decision. He would propose to Nayeli, but not in the way most men in his world would. He wanted to create something deeply personal, something that would show the effort and care he felt. He decided to sew a wedding dress himself, a white dress, which in his world symbolized purity and devotion. It was an unusual idea, even among his own neighbors, many of whom were shocked at the thought of a man taking on such a task. Sewing had never been his skill, and yet he believed that the work of his hands, done with intention and love, could convey the sincerity of his heart in ways words alone could not. Thomas began the work with no clear idea of how to proceed. He purchased simple materials from the nearest town, fabric that gleamed like fresh snow in the sunlight, thread strong enough to hold the seams together, and needles that would help him shape his vision. He spent long hours learning to measure and cut, to stitch carefully, and to shape the dress to fit Naomi's figure. He worked through frustration, dropped stitches, and countless mistakes, but he persisted. With each hour, he poured not only his hands but also his hopes, fears, and admiration for Naomi into the fabric. The ranch became filled with the quiet sounds of effort, rustling fabric, the scratch of the needle, and the occasional muttered curse as a seam refused to cooperate. Yet in every moment of struggle, there was also determination, an unspoken promise that this gesture was worth every difficulty. As Thomas labored, he reflected on the significance of the dress. He knew that the white fabric would be unfamiliar to Naomi in its symbolism, yet he hoped she would see it as a symbol of his effort, his patience, and his desire to honor her. He thought about the community that would surround them, the elders who would watch carefully, and the warriors who would later arrive to witness the union. This was not a task done lightly. It was a message in cloth, a bridge between two worlds, and a testament to what respect and love could accomplish when tempered with care. Meanwhile, Naomi observed Thomas's preparations quietly, with a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism. She saw the dedication in his actions, the way he approached the unfamiliar task not as a chore but as a meaningful endeavor. She admired the way he was willing to step into a world he did not fully understand, not to change it, but to honor it. Slowly, her trust deepened, and she began to imagine a life in which their worlds could coexist, where her traditions could be respected, and his sincerity could be valued. She thought about the challenges that lay ahead, how others might view their union, the questions of family and community. But the sight of Thomas working tirelessly, a man so clearly intent on honoring her, gave her hope. Word of Thomas's efforts began to spread beyond the ranch and the immediate community. Neighbors whispered about the unusual sight of a man sewing a wedding dress, some amused, some skeptical, but many intrigued. Even among the Apache, stories traveled through the camps about the rancher who sought to honor Naomi in this unconventional way. There was anticipation in the air, a quiet sense that something remarkable was unfolding, something that bridged not just two lives but two worlds. In these moments, the bond between Thomas and Naomi grew stronger, rooted in patience, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of what it meant to honor one another. The wide plains, the rugged mountains, and the quiet, enduring land became witnesses to a love that was simple yet profound. It was a love built not on fleeting passion, but on sustained effort, thoughtfulness, and the willingness to step beyond comfort to show respect. In every stitch, every measured cut of fabric, and every late hour of labor, Thomas expressed not just his feelings but a deep commitment to understanding and honoring Naomi's life and world. As the first part of their journey drew to a close, the sun would set over the vast horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch and the surrounding hills. Thomas, exhausted but determined, laid aside the nearly finished dress and looked out at the land that had shaped him, the woman who had captured his admiration, and the community that would soon witness their union. He knew the road ahead would require courage, patience, and humility, but he also knew that this moment, this effort, had already begun to bridge worlds in a way that words alone could never achieve. And so, in the quiet of the evening, with the wind whispering through the grass and the mountains standing sentinel in the distance, Thomas prepared to take the next step in a journey that was as much about respect and understanding as it was about love, a journey that would soon bring together not just two hearts, but two communities, in a union that promised to be remembered for years to come. The days following Thomas's decision to sew the dress were filled with quiet anticipation and subtle tension. The ranch, usually a place of routine work and the constant hum of cattle, became a hub of activity unlike any other time in recent memory. Thomas continued to perfect the dress, each stitch taken with careful thought, yet he also found himself increasingly aware of the larger world beyond the ranch, the community, the elders, and the warriors who watched closely, silently judging and waiting to see if this unusual plan would succeed. News of Thomas's efforts spread faster than he had imagined. Among the Apache, whispers circulated about the rancher's dedication and the curious nature of the white dress he was sewing. Some elders were skeptical. "Can a man understand the ways of our people?" they asked. "Can he truly honor her and respect our customs?" Others were quietly impressed. Thomas had spent years observing, learning, and helping without demanding change or recognition. He had proven himself reliable, patient, and most importantly, sincere. These elders began to see that the dress, unusual as it was, might be a symbol not of ignorance but of respect. Meanwhile, within the rancher's own small community, Thomas's neighbors were puzzled. They had never heard of a man taking a sewing needle in hand, much less creating a wedding dress from scratch. Some laughed, thinking it was a strange and unnecessary task. Others wondered why he was going to such lengths. "Why not just buy a dress like everyone else?" they asked. Thomas ignored their questions, for he knew that the meaning of his actions could not be measured in the opinions of outsiders. It was not about spectacle. It was about showing care, effort, and understanding in a way that words could not. Naeli, on her part, observed Thomas's preparations with a mixture of curiosity and careful caution. She appreciated the sincerity of his effort, yet she understood the challenges that lay ahead. Marriage was not a private affair in her community. It was a union that intertwined families, traditions, and the eyes of all those around them. She knew that warriors, respected elders, and even distant members of the tribe would come to witness the ceremony. Some might approve, and some might question the union. Naeli herself was ready, but she could not ignore the weight of tradition that hung over them. As the wedding day approached, Thomas began preparing more than just the dress. He wanted to ensure that the ceremony would honor both worlds. He spoke to Naeli about her customs, asking carefully about rituals, ceremonies, and traditions that he should observe. Naeli guided him gently, explaining how elders were to be respected, how offerings should be presented, and how to address the warriors properly. Each explanation Thomas received was met with careful attention. He repeated the instructions to himself, practiced quietly, and made notes in his mind, knowing that even a small misstep could disrupt the delicate balance they were trying to achieve. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the distant mountains, Thomas worked tirelessly on the final adjustments to the dress. The white fabric, now shaped and stitched, reflected the warm glow of the late-day sun. He carefully inspected each seam, ensuring there were no loose threads, no imperfections, for he knew that every detail mattered. To him, the dress was more than fabric and thread. It was a statement of commitment, of respect, and of effort that came from the heart. With each stitch, Thomas felt a growing sense of responsibility, not only to Naeli, but also to the community that would soon witness the union. The community's curiosity began to build as the days drew closer. Warriors from neighboring areas began arriving quietly, observing from a distance at first. Their presence was a reminder of the stakes, for these men were the guardians of tradition, tasked with ensuring that customs were preserved, and that newcomers honored the ways of the people. Some of them questioned Thomas quietly, observing his work, testing his patience, and noting the respect he showed for Nayeli and her world. Others were more open, offering quiet advice, helping him understand subtleties that only years of tradition could teach. Thomas listened intently, absorbing everything, never taking offense and always striving to learn. The tension was palpable but not oppressive. It was a tension born of care, curiosity, and the desire to ensure that the day would be meaningful for all involved. Thomas understood that the warriors' presence was both a challenge and a gift. They could have reacted with anger or suspicion, but instead, many were willing to observe, evaluate, and eventually participate in a union that, while unusual, had the potential to unite communities in a gesture of respect and understanding. For Thomas, this was humbling. He realized that his simple act of sewing a dress had grown into something far larger than he had ever imagined, a symbol of trust, commitment, and the willingness to bridge worlds. Nayeli continued her own preparations, quietly ensuring that everything would be ready for the ceremony. She spoke to the elders about the dress, explaining Thomas's effort and intention. While some were skeptical, many were moved by the sincerity of the gesture. Nayeli herself felt a mix of pride and nervousness. She had seen Thomas's dedication, and she knew that his intentions were genuine, yet she also understood that the day would test their patience, courage, and understanding. As the final day approached, the air seemed charged with anticipation. The ranch was transformed from a simple homestead into a place of preparation. Firewood was gathered for cooking, seats were arranged for elders and visitors, and the space where the ceremony would take place was cleared and decorated with flowers and natural elements that reflected both traditions. Thomas moved among the preparations, offering help, listening to advice, and ensuring that everything was as it should be. Even the smallest details mattered to him: the placement of a branch, the folding of a cloth, the arrangement of stones for balance and respect. The evening before the ceremony, a small gathering formed near the ranch. Warriors arrived in small groups, quiet but imposing, each carrying the weight of responsibility and tradition. They observed Thomas, seeing how he prepared, how he treated Nayeli, and how carefully he approached the rituals he had been taught. Some whispered to one another, debating whether this union could succeed, while others watched with a quiet admiration for the effort a man had put into honoring their ways. Thomas noticed their presence but did not let it unsettle him. He understood that respect was earned through patience, humility, and action, not words alone. That night Thomas could hardly sleep. He lay awake, thinking about the day ahead, the dress neatly folded on a table nearby, and Nayeli, who would soon stand before the community wearing the work of his hands. He reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the long conversations, the shared labor, the quiet moments of understanding, and the challenges they had faced together. Every thread in the dress represented not only his effort but also the trust between them, a tangible proof of commitment that could not be questioned. Morning arrived with a golden light spilling across the plains. Birds sang in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers and earth. Thomas dressed carefully, ensuring that he looked presentable, yet he was aware that the attention would not be on him. The focus, as it should be, was on Nayeli and the respect shown to her community. Warriors and elders began to gather, their eyes alert, their expressions serious but not unkind. Neighbors arrived quietly, curious but respectful. The scene was set for a ceremony that had grown far beyond a simple wedding, a moment that would test patience, understanding, and the power of sincere effort. Thomas waited for Nayeli, his heart steady but full of anticipation. He thought of every lesson he had learned, every instruction she had given, and every moment he had spent sewing the dress with care. He knew that this was more than a personal gesture. It was a bridge between worlds, a sign of trust, and a testament to the possibility of unity. As Naeli approached, the community watching in silence, Thomas felt a mix of pride, nervousness, and deep respect. The dress, bright and pure in the morning sun, reflected not just light, but the effort, patience, and love that had gone into every stitch. The stage was set, and the eyes of many were upon them. Thomas realized that the next steps would require courage and humility, and that every word, every gesture, and every action would carry meaning far beyond their own lives. The moment was larger than love alone. It was about respect, understanding, and the delicate balance of honoring two worlds at once. As Naeli stepped closer, the threads of the dress seemed to hold not just fabric but the hopes of a community, the lessons of tradition, and the promise of a union built on patience, care, and mutual respect. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the sun climbing slowly over the distant hills and painting the plains with golden light. Thomas rose early, his heart steady but filled with anticipation. After weeks of preparation, the day had finally arrived, the day when effort, patience, and respect would meet in a ceremony that could unite not only two hearts but two communities. He dressed carefully, adjusting his simple shirt and worn trousers, but his thoughts were on Naeli, the woman whose courage, wisdom, and grace had captured his admiration. The ranch, usually a quiet place, was now alive with movement. Neighbors from distant homesteads arrived quietly, their curiosity tempered by respect. The Apache elders and warriors came in small groups, riding horses with silent dignity, their presence commanding attention. Each step they took, each nod they gave, reminded Thomas that this day was far more than a personal union. It was a meeting of traditions, a blending of worlds, and a test of sincerity and understanding. Naeli emerged from her dwelling as the sun climbed higher, dressed in the white garment Thomas had painstakingly sewn. The dress was simple yet elegant, every seam carefully stitched, every fold designed with intention. It shimmered faintly in the morning light, a symbol not of extravagance but of thoughtfulness and dedication. Naeli moved with her usual grace, her calm demeanor masking the nervousness that only someone aware of the stakes could feel. She had spent the night preparing herself, ensuring that her hair and adornments honored both her people and the significance of the day. Thomas felt a sudden swell of emotion. The sight of Naeli in the dress, standing before him and the gathered community, filled him with pride and awe. Every hour of work, every moment of doubt, every careful stitch seemed worth it now. The dress, fragile in appearance but strong in meaning, symbolized more than marriage. It represented the effort to bridge two worlds with sincerity, patience, and respect. The warriors who had been observing quietly began to step forward. Their arrival was not sudden or forceful, but deliberate, measured, and commanding. They moved with a sense of purpose, their eyes alert and their expression serious. These were men whose role was to safeguard traditions, to ensure that the ways of their people were honored, and to protect the dignity of those they respected. Their presence added weight to the ceremony, a reminder that every action mattered, and that respect must be earned and maintained. Thomas felt a quiet tension settle over him as the warriors approached. He had expected their presence, but seeing them together, a small army of watchful eyes, made the reality tangible. Yet he also felt a quiet resolve. He had prepared for this day for weeks, learning the customs, practicing the gestures, and understanding the subtleties of respect. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that sincerity and humility were his allies. Every step, every word, and every gesture would be guided by genuine care and respect. The ceremony began with the elders offering their blessings. Thomas watched closely, mimicking gestures where appropriate, speaking words he had been taught, and responding with the humility expected of someone entering a new culture. Naeli guided him quietly, her presence a calming influence. She moved gracefully, ensuring that every action respected tradition while also acknowledging Thomas's effort. The balance between the old ways and the new was delicate, yet it unfolded with a sense of natural harmony. The warriors observed silently, occasionally exchanging glances or nods. They noted Thomas's patience, his attentiveness, and his willingness to follow instructions without arrogance or hesitation. In their world, respect was earned through action, not promises. Thomas understood this deeply. Each step he took, each word he spoke, and each gesture he made was carefully measured. He offered small gifts of gratitude, a tradition he had learned from Naeli, and bowed with humility to elders who had guided him. Despite the solemnity of the occasion, there were moments of quiet humanity. A warrior offered advice on the proper placement of ceremonial items, and Thomas responded with gratitude rather than frustration. Naeli smiled briefly, appreciating the genuine effort her partner was making. The community, watching closely, began to soften. What had started as cautious observation was slowly transforming into acceptance. They saw a man willing to step outside his comfort zone, learning and respecting their ways, and they began to understand the sincerity behind his actions. As the ceremony progressed, the dress became a focal point not just for its beauty, but for the story it told. Every stitch, every careful fold, every detail revealed the patience, care, and love that had gone into its creation. Naeli moved with confidence, proud not only of the garment but of the man who had made it. The warriors, once reserved and serious, now nodded in quiet approval, recognizing the effort and respect demonstrated through Thomas's work. The turning point came when a respected elder approached Thomas. The man was tall and stoic, his presence commanding attention. For a moment, silence fell over the gathering. Thomas stepped forward with humility, lowering his gaze respectfully. The elder inspected the dress, observed Thomas's posture, and then nodded slowly. It was a gesture of recognition, a quiet acknowledgement that the man's sincerity and effort were genuine. The tension in the air eased, replaced by a sense of cautious acceptance. With the elder's approval, the ceremony moved to its final stages. Words of blessing were spoken, hands were joined, and the community watched as Thomas and Naeli stood together. The blend of traditions, the ranchers' simple gestures combined with Apache rituals, created a ceremony that was both meaningful and unique. It was a moment where patience, effort, and understanding culminated in a visible and tangible symbol of respect. The warriors, who had initially arrived with measured caution, began to participate in small but significant ways. Some offered advice on traditional songs and movements, others assisted in guiding the flow of the ceremony, and a few quietly shared stories of similar unions in their history. Their involvement, initially formal and distant, became an essential part of the ceremony's richness. It was no longer just about observation, it was about engagement, recognition, and shared celebration. As the sun climbed higher, the ceremony reached its peak. Thomas and Naeli faced each other, hands clasped, hearts steady but full of emotion. The dress, white and pure in the sunlight, reflected more than light. It reflected effort, patience, and the bridging of two worlds. Thomas felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment, not in a boastful way, but in the quiet knowledge that he had honored Naeli, respected her community, and approached this union with sincerity. Naeli's eyes shone with pride and admiration. She saw in Thomas not just a partner, but someone willing to step into the unknown, to learn, and to act with care and respect. The ceremony, though unfamiliar in some of its details, had become a true representation of their bond. It was a union not forced by tradition alone, but strengthened by understanding, effort, and the willingness to honor each other's worlds. After the formal part of the ceremony ended, a quiet celebration followed. Warriors and community members shared food, music, and stories. Laughter began to mingle with solemnity, creating an atmosphere of warmth and connection. Thomas and Naeli moved among their guests, expressing gratitude and humility. Every smile, every nod, every word of recognition from the community reinforced the significance of the day. By the afternoon, the once-tense atmosphere had transformed. The warriors who had arrived with measured caution were now engaged in storytelling and shared memories, recounting moments of courage, wisdom, and tradition. Neighbors marveled at the effort Thomas had put into the dress, not as a mere novelty, but as a genuine act of love and respect. Naeli, at the center of the celebration, radiated pride and contentment, knowing that the day had honored her heritage while celebrating the bond she shared with Thomas. In the quiet moments after the ceremony, Thomas and Naeli stood together, looking out over the plains. The mountains, silent and steadfast, seemed to acknowledge the day's significance. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the faint aroma of cooked meals from the celebration. It was a moment of reflection, where the efforts, patience, and respect that had brought them here could be felt in the air itself. This day, marked by the careful stitching of a dress, the measured attention to tradition, and the engagement of a community, would be remembered for years. It was a turning point not just for Thomas and Naeli, but for everyone who had witnessed it. The warriors, initially cautious and serious, had become participants in a meaningful union. The elders, once skeptical, now recognized sincerity and effort. And the couple themselves had navigated a delicate balance, demonstrating that patience, respect, and care could bridge worlds that might have seemed far apart. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the plains and the mountains beyond, Thomas and Naeli found a quiet spot away from the celebration. They sat together, hands still intertwined, hearts full but calm. The day had tested them, challenged them, and shown them the importance of humility, patience, and understanding. Every stitch in the dress, every gesture of respect, every shared moment of guidance had led them to this point, a turning point where love and respect intertwined with tradition and community. The warriors would eventually return to their homes, carrying stories of the unusual but successful union. The elders would recount the day as an example of patience, sincerity, and understanding. And Thomas and Naeli, standing together as partners and equals, had created not just a wedding, but a bridge between two worlds, a moment where effort and respect had triumphed over doubt and caution. The days following the wedding were filled with both joy and challenges. The ceremony had been a success, but Thomas and Naeli quickly realized that life after the wedding would not be as simple as the moment of celebration. The presence of warriors, elders, and neighbors at their union had brought honor, but it had also drawn attention that came with responsibility. Every choice they made, every action they took, seemed to carry the weight of expectation. Thomas returned to the ranch with a mixture of relief and reflection. He knew that the ceremony was only the beginning of their journey together. While he had worked tirelessly to sew the dress, follow the customs, and honor Naeli's community, the real challenge lay in building a life together, balancing two worlds and maintaining respect for both their traditions. He was determined to continue learning, to remain humble, and to honor the bond they had just solidified. The Apache community also adjusted to the new reality. Some elders watched closely, ensuring that the union was respected and that traditions continued to be observed. Warriors visited occasionally, not out of suspicion, but to offer guidance and to ensure that the lessons of the ceremony were remembered. Thomas found these visits both intimidating and encouraging. The presence of these guardians reminded him that respect was ongoing. It was not a one-time gesture. Every interaction, every decision, and every word mattered. Naeli, for her part, embraced her new life with Thomas while remaining attentive to her community. She guided him patiently, explaining the nuances of daily customs, from preparing meals according to traditional methods to observing small rituals that were meaningful in the eyes of her people. Thomas listened carefully, learning each task with care. There were mistakes, folded clothes done incorrectly, food cooked with slight variations, or offerings placed in the wrong order. But with each error came a lesson, and with each lesson, understanding grew. The blending of their worlds was not always easy. Thomas's ranching neighbors were still adjusting to the idea of him being married to an Apache woman. Some whispered doubts, while others remained silent, uncertain of how to navigate the new dynamic. Meanwhile, within the Apache community, there were subtle reminders of the responsibilities Thomas now carried. He was expected to participate in community events, contribute to collective tasks, and show continual respect for traditions. At times, the weight of these expectations felt heavy, and Thomas wondered whether he was truly capable of honoring both worlds in every moment. One of the first challenges they faced came when a group of neighboring Apache warriors arrived unannounced. They had heard stories of the wedding and wanted to visit the couple to understand how the union had been handled. Their presence was imposing, yet Thomas approached them with humility. He greeted them respectfully, followed the guidance Nayeli had given him, and participated in the discussions and tasks they introduced. By showing patience, attentiveness, and genuine effort, he began to earn their respect, even as he continued to learn the subtleties of their expectations. Nayeli's guidance was invaluable during these visits. She remained calm and composed, explaining customs, offering gentle corrections, and helping Thomas understand not just the actions but the meaning behind them. The warriors, initially cautious, began to see Thomas's sincerity, his willingness to adapt, and the respect he showed for their culture. Gradually, their interactions shifted from scrutiny to quiet approval. Thomas realized that these challenges were not obstacles to overcome, but opportunities to strengthen trust and understanding. Daily life brought its own struggles. The ranch work was relentless, demanding strength, patience, and attention to detail. Thomas continued to tend to the cattle, repair fences, and maintain the land, often while balancing the expectations of the Apache community. Nayeli assisted, offering guidance in ways that respected both her traditions and the practical necessities of ranch life. Together, they navigated the complex balance of maintaining the ranch, honoring customs, and nurturing their relationship. Each day brought lessons in patience, resilience, and compromise. Despite the challenges, moments of joy and connection kept them grounded. In the evenings, they would sit together watching the sun set behind the distant mountains, sharing quiet conversation, laughter, and reflections on the day. Thomas marveled at Nayeli's wisdom, her ability to balance strength with kindness, and her patient guidance. Nayeli appreciated Thomas's determination, humility, and willingness to learn, even when mistakes were made. These moments reminded them that love was more than ceremony. It was daily effort, understanding, and shared respect. Community events provided further lessons and opportunities for connection. Thomas attended gatherings, dances, and rituals, carefully observing and participating where appropriate. Nayeli remained by his side, quietly offering support and advice. Each event was a chance to strengthen bonds, learn new customs, and demonstrate commitment to the community. Thomas gradually became more confident in these interactions, his initial nervousness replaced by a quiet understanding that sincerity and effort were recognized, even if not immediately praised. One afternoon, a situation arose that tested both patience and trust. A disagreement broke out between neighboring families over grazing land, a sensitive issue with potential for conflict. Thomas, guided by Nayeli, approached the matter with humility, listening carefully, offering support without imposing, and seeking guidance from elders. His respectful approach helped calm tensions, and the dispute was resolved peacefully. The incident reinforced the importance of patience, diplomacy, and respect in navigating a community that valued tradition and harmony. Financial and practical challenges were also present. Maintaining a ranch required constant labor, resources, and careful planning. Supplies could be scarce, weather could be unpredictable, and the land itself demanded constant attention. Thomas worked tirelessly to ensure the ranch remained productive, often relying on advice from Nayeli, who understood both the land and the ways of her people. Together, they faced hardships with determination, learning to rely on each other's strengths and compensate for weaknesses. Through it all, the bond between Thomas and Nayeli grew stronger. Each challenge, whether social, practical, or cultural, became a shared experience that reinforced trust and partnership. They learned to communicate openly, to support each other, and to approach difficulties with patience rather than frustration. The lessons of the wedding day, the importance of respect, effort, and sincerity, remained central in their lives, guiding each interaction and decision. The warriors who had attended the wedding returned periodically, checking in on the couple, offering guidance and sharing stories of their own experiences. These visits, initially intimidating, became opportunities for learning, reflection, and strengthening relationships. Thomas grew more confident in his understanding of customs, rituals, and expectations, while Nayeli continued to provide gentle guidance and support. Their partnership became a model of mutual respect, demonstrating that sincere effort and patience could bridge worlds. Even as challenges persisted, there were moments of celebration and connection. Harvesting crops, tending livestock, preparing communal meals, and participating in rituals became opportunities for shared joy. The couple's laughter, patience, and kindness gradually earned the admiration and trust of both communities. Stories of their perseverance and respect spread, creating a reputation of sincerity and commitment that would endure. Through these experiences, Thomas learned a profound truth. Respect was not a one-time gesture, nor was love measured by grand acts alone. True respect and partnership required daily attention, patience, and humility. Each interaction with the community, each chore completed with care, and each moment of listening and learning was a thread in the fabric of trust and understanding. Nayeli's guidance, wisdom, and patience were essential, showing him that partnership was as much about supporting, learning, and listening as it was about affection and admiration. The days and weeks that followed solidified their place in both communities. Thomas became known not just as a rancher or an outsider, but as a man who had earned trust through consistent effort, humility, and care. Nayeli, proud and patient, continued to guide, nurture, and protect the values of her people while embracing the partnership that allowed both worlds to coexist. Together, they demonstrated that love, respect, and understanding could bridge differences, overcome doubt, and create harmony. Even in moments of hardship, drought, challenging weather, or misunderstandings, the lessons of the wedding remained central. Thomas and Nayeli faced difficulties together, guided by patience, empathy, and respect. The white dress, carefully stitched and full of meaning, remained a symbol not only of the ceremony but of ongoing effort, dedication, and the bond they shared. It was a reminder that love and respect were active, lived, and demonstrated through deeds as much as words. As the seasons changed, Thomas and Nayeli continued to grow together, navigating the complexities of ranch life, community expectations, and cultural traditions. Their story became one of resilience, partnership, and the quiet strength of mutual respect. The warriors and elders, once cautious, now offered guidance with trust and admiration. Neighbors, initially skeptical, began to recognize the depth of sincerity and effort that defined their lives. Through it all, one lesson remained clear. A union built on patience, respect, and consistent effort could overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable. Thomas and Nayeli had faced scrutiny, doubt, and the pressures of two worlds watching closely. Yet they emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. Their journey was far from easy, but it was a testament to the power of humility, understanding, and love expressed through action. In the quiet evenings when the work of the day was done, Thomas and Nayeli would sit together, reflecting on the lessons learned, the challenges overcome, and the shared path ahead. The land stretched before them, vast and enduring, a reminder of both hardship and beauty. Their bond, strengthened through shared effort and understanding, had become a foundation upon which they could continue to build a life of mutual respect, harmony, and enduring love. As the months passed, Thomas and Nayeli settled into a rhythm that balanced the demands of ranch life with the customs of the Apache community. Life had grown steadier, yet every day brought its own lessons, challenges, and moments of quiet beauty. The memory of their wedding, with the white dress Thomas had carefully stitched and the warriors who had watched closely, remained vivid. It was no longer just a ceremony. It had become the foundation for a life built on respect, patience, and understanding. The ranch continued to demand hard work. Each morning, Thomas rose before sunrise, tending to the cattle, repairing fences, and managing the daily tasks that ensured the ranch remained productive. Nayeli, equally dedicated, assisted in ways that honored both her knowledge of the land and the traditions of her people. Together they worked side by side, sharing labor and responsibilities. It was in these quiet, everyday moments that the depth of their partnership truly revealed itself. Each gesture of help, each shared task, was a silent affirmation of their bond. Their relationship continued to thrive because it was rooted in mutual respect. Thomas never assumed he knew everything. He continued to learn from Nayeli, listening carefully to her guidance and absorbing the wisdom she had accumulated over years of experience. Nayeli, in turn, appreciated Thomas's patience, diligence, and humility. She had seen men come and go, but Thomas's steady presence, willingness to learn, and genuine effort set him apart. In their daily interactions, whether preparing meals, tending the land, or engaging with the community, a quiet harmony grew, a sense that their partnership was both equal and enduring. The community remained an integral part of their lives. Warriors who had attended the wedding continued to visit, offering guidance, sharing stories, and sometimes just observing quietly. These visits were never intrusive. Instead, they served as reminders that the union was not just about two people, but about trust, respect, and connection across worlds. Elders offered advice, sometimes stern, sometimes gentle, always thoughtful. Thomas learned to accept feedback gracefully, understanding that humility was a sign of strength, not weakness. Nayeli's guidance ensured that every interaction honored the values of her people, creating trust and mutual respect that deepened with each visit. There were moments of reflection that reminded Thomas of the journey they had undertaken. He often thought about the long hours he had spent sewing the white dress, the mistakes he had made, and the persistence it had required. What had begun as a simple gesture of love had transformed into a symbol of dedication, patience, and respect. The dress itself, now carefully stored and preserved, was no longer just fabric. It represented every effort, every lesson, and every act of understanding that had shaped their union. Nayeli, too, reflected on the journey. She thought about the uncertainty she had felt before the wedding, the careful considerations of her community, and the responsibility she carried in guiding Thomas through traditions that were unfamiliar to him. She marveled at the patience he had shown, the sincerity in his actions, and the humility with which he accepted guidance. In those quiet moments, she recognized that their partnership was built not on fleeting emotion, but on a deep foundation of shared effort and understanding. The seasons changed, bringing with them the challenges and rewards of frontier life. Winters were harsh, with cold winds cutting across the plains, and summers were dry, testing both the land and the cattle. Yet Thomas and Naeli faced these challenges together. They learned to anticipate difficulties, to prepare for scarcity, and to find joy even in small successes. A bountiful harvest, the safe birth of a calf, or the arrival of a friend or neighbor to share a meal. Each experience reinforced their bond, demonstrating that partnership was as much about facing adversity together as it was about celebrating happiness. Stories of their wedding and the unusual gesture of the hand-sewn dress continued to circulate. Warriors and neighbors spoke quietly of the rancher who had honored an Apache woman with patience, effort, and humility. Elders reflected on the significance of the union, noting how it had strengthened connections between communities and demonstrated the power of sincerity and respect. Even years later, those who had witnessed the ceremony would recount it as an example of what could be achieved when love was paired with understanding, and effort was paired with humility. Children and younger members of both communities looked to Thomas and Naeli as examples. They observed not just a marriage, but a way of living, one that valued effort, respect, and harmony over pride, haste, or rigid adherence to assumptions. Thomas taught what he knew of the land, the cattle, and practical skills, while Naeli shared her knowledge of traditions, customs, and the values that had guided her people for generations. Together, they became teachers, guides, and examples, showing that differences could be bridged through patience, learning, and mutual respect. Their home, though simple, became a place of connection and warmth. Neighbors and community members often visited, sharing meals, stories, and advice. The ranch, once a quiet and solitary place, was now alive with the energy of shared experience. Music, laughter, and conversation filled the air, blending traditions and cultures in subtle but meaningful ways. Thomas and Naeli found joy in these interactions, understanding that community was as much about giving as receiving, and that respect and effort were ongoing commitments. One of the most meaningful aspects of their life together was the quiet moments they shared. In the evenings after the work of the day was done, they would sit together watching the sunset, reflecting on the land, the journey they had undertaken, and the growth they had experienced. These moments, often silent, were filled with understanding, trust, and a profound appreciation for the bond they shared. Thomas would occasionally glance at the dress, safely stored but always remembered, and feel gratitude not just for the ceremony, but for the lessons it had taught him about patience, respect, and the value of sincere effort. As time passed, their story became woven into the fabric of the community. The wedding dress, the careful planning, the respectful engagement with the warriors and elders, it all became part of the collective memory. People spoke of it as an example of what could happen when effort, humility, and sincerity guided actions. It was a story passed down to younger generations, a lesson in the importance of patience, respect, and the power of bridging worlds through genuine care. Thomas and Naeli also grew in understanding of each other. The small differences that had once seemed challenging, the pace of ranch work versus community expectations, the blending of traditions, and the occasional misunderstanding, became opportunities for learning. They learned to communicate openly, to listen without judgment, and to support each other in ways that strengthened their bond. Challenges that might have caused conflict became opportunities for growth, deepening their partnership and reinforcing their shared values. Their life together, though marked by work and responsibility, was also marked by celebration. Festivals, harvests, and community gatherings were opportunities to honor both traditions, creating new rituals that blended customs in ways that were meaningful and respectful. Thomas and Naeli participated fully, not as outsiders or observers, but as valued members of the community. Their presence reinforced the idea that respect, effort, and sincerity could transcend differences, creating connection and understanding that lasted far beyond a single event. In later years, Thomas would often reflect on the journey that had begun with a simple idea, sewing a white dress to honor Naeli. What had seemed like a small gesture had grown into something much larger, a union that respected tradition, built trust, and demonstrated the power of patience and effort. Naeli, reflecting on the same journey, saw not just a man who had tried, but a partner who had learned, adapted, and grown alongside her. Their story was one of shared growth, understanding, and the quiet power of respect. As their life continued, the land itself seemed to witness and support their journey. The mountains stood firm and enduring, the plains stretched wide and open, and the wind carried whispers of seasons, growth, and continuity. Each element of nature became a silent companion to their partnership, reminding them that patience, care, and effort were as essential in life as the sun, water, and soil. Their home became a place of learning, celebration, and reflection, a place where two worlds had found harmony through respect and dedication. In the end, Thomas and Naeli's story was remembered not just for the wedding or the dress, but for the life that followed, a life built on mutual respect, understanding, and daily effort. Their union became a symbol of what could be achieved when patience, sincerity, and care guided actions. They had bridged differences, faced challenges, and grown together, leaving a legacy of harmony and partnership that inspired those around them. Even years later, when the story was told by elders and recounted by younger generations, it remained a testament to the enduring power of respect, effort, and love expressed through action. Thomas and Naeli had shown that when hearts are committed, when actions are guided by sincerity, and when traditions are honored, remarkable connections are possible. Their life together, shaped by both joy and challenge, became a quiet legend of patience, understanding, and the enduring strength of shared effort. In the soft glow of the evening, Thomas and Naeli would often sit together, hands clasped, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The land around them whispered with the memory of seasons past and seasons yet to come. Their story, once a simple gesture of sewing a dress, had become a life of shared understanding, enduring love, and lasting respect, a story that would remain in the hearts of their community forever.